Good morning, everybody. This is Louise Savela with Rails. I'm a consulting and continuing education specialist, and thank you all for joining us this morning for Lynn Hoffman's presentation about signage in the library. I just have a few quick technical announcements, and then we'll turn things over to Lynn and get started. Everybody in the audience is muted. If you have questions, there's a question box on your navigation panel. You can send those in, and I will be sharing those with Lynn throughout the program, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Your control panel has an orange arrow. You can click on that arrow to expand or collapse it and move it out of the way if you need to. If your audio is not working, make sure to check your speakers and volume. You could also call in on the phone to do audio, and just make sure to enter your access code and PIN. If you have audio problems, you can send a message to me in the question box, or sometimes logging out and logging back in to go to webinar. That will help. I think that's all I have for now, so I'm going to turn it over to Lynn and let her get started. Good morning, Lynn.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Okay, so the title of the presentation that I have today is called Why Do I Like That Sign? And the reason I called it that is because unless you're a signage nerd, like I am, you probably don't notice good signage. You notice bad signage, or signage that isn't there, or where there's too much. Good signage, like a lot of things in design, is kind of transparent. The signs are there where you need them. They have the information that you need, and they don't call attention to themselves as a sign so much as communicate with you. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go over some of the main types of signs that we use in libraries, as well as some of the concepts that contribute to good signage. Hopefully that'll help you get an eye for how to improve signage in your library. I've got a quote here from Paco Underhill, who wrote a book called Why We Buy, which, if you haven't read it, is fantastic. Paco Underhill has a consulting business called EnviroCell, and he basically does kind of social science and anthropology almost about the behavior of people in retail situations. There's a lot to learn for us, especially in public libraries, from his research. He actually presented at PLA several years ago, but to focus on signs, he says that signs need to do two things. First, get your audience's attention, and second, present your message in a clear, logical fashion. If you can do those two things, you're a step ahead. So we'll apply that to three different types of signs. Wayfinding. Wayfinding signs help customers understand where they should go for what they need. Informational signs, which tell customers something important or useful or something that we're required to tell them. And promotional signs, which get the customer's attention and then tell them something about a service or a program we think that they might like. I have 5 concepts that apply to all 3 of these types of signs. The first one is consistency. Do the signs look like they belong together, like they're part of a whole idea? Complexity, also known as less is more. Are there too many messages on the sign, or is the message too long to comprehend in the context that someone's likely to see it? Placement, is the sign in the right place for the message? Legibility, can you actually read it? And can you read it from the distance at which you're most likely to encounter it? And then layout, is the most important information the most prominent and easy to understand? So we'll look at all of those concepts as they relate to the 3 types of signs, starting with wayfinding. Wayfinding doesn't apply just to signs. It's also about graphical and physical elements of signs, including the text, but also the architecture and the environment, all things that help people feel smart about where they need to go to get what they need. Let's see here. So let's start with wayfinding. I have used Target for a lot of my examples. I think they do a really good job with signage, and also everybody's been in a Target store, so even if this isn't your store layout, you have some familiarity with some of the concepts that we're going to be talking about. The first thing is consistency. So Target does a really, really good job with consistency. They've got the red and white and a similar typeface throughout all of their signs. So you know if you want to find the furniture section, the signage is going to be in the same place on the ceiling, and you're looking for the color red, and you'll be able to find where it is that you need to go next. Target does a great job of maximizing legibility. White on red actually isn't the strongest color combination for readability, but they've chosen a font that's highly readable, and they give plenty of white space, or in this case, red space. That's the empty space around the text to the outside of the sign, and that helps you to understand what the sign is saying without having to kind of decipher it or figure things out. The other thing that's interesting about Target is when they have special promotional signage, like for summer stuff or back to school, that signage, if you notice, is never red. And it's because they don't want it to compete with the wayfinding signage. Target also does a nice job with their signage hierarchy. So the large signs that we looked at in the last slide are the high-level department signs, and then this is in the grocery area. So they've got the aisle sign that tells you where the stuff is. There's also a smaller sign kind of down below at the end of the aisle that gives you a little bit more detail, and then the shelf kind of talkers that say exactly where the section is along the shelf. It does a really good job. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about placement. Wayfinding is about decision points. So you walk into a space and you get to a point where you need to decide which way to go, and you want a sign to be in a place where you can see it from that decision point to help you make that decision. So in your library, you have decision points once people get inside the building, although people often take 20 to 30 feet walking in through the entrance of a building before they stop the task of entering and start the task of figuring out what it is that they want to do. So pushing wayfinding signage into the building is usually a good idea. There may be other big decision points, like at the top of the stairs or coming off an elevator. The idea is that you want to put a message there that helps people understand where they need to go. And I've got this picture here because way back here in the corner, your eye, if you were standing at this spot in a Target, would actually do a better job of seeing at this distance. The camera doesn't do quite as good a job, so I'll blow this up. You can understand from this distance that that's food on this high hanging sign. So even though you can't read the words fresh grocery from that distance, you know that if you're looking for a pineapple, that's the direction that you want to head in, and it's right at the spot where you need to make a decision about which direction to go. Okay, so let's talk about some bad examples. Names have been redacted to protect the innocent. So this is a consistency issue. This is actually a pretty good sign, giving you an idea of which direction to go for different parts of the collection. And the inconsistent part is the computers that's down below. And what happens is, because the sign is kind of tacked on, it isn't using the same font or layout as the rest of the sign, it doesn't look like it belongs, and that means that people will tend not to see it. They'll see the official part, and the tacked on part just won't register as a sign that they need to pay attention to. I love these end panels. They're really beautiful and a cool way to use that space. However, they make it very, very difficult to do any wayfinding about the collection. These tiny little rangefinder signs kind of blend in with all the action that's happening on those end panel images. There isn't enough white space around it to make it stand out. The font really isn't big enough. There isn't enough contrast between the sign with that important information and the end panel, which is the decorative element. So I would make those signs bigger and probably make the text on them quite a bit bigger as well. Okay, so we're talking about entering the building. This sign is actually great, but it's in totally the wrong place. It's actually outside the building. It's before you get inside. Um, as I said, based on research, especially the Paco Underhill stuff, you're not going to think about where it is that you need to go if you're in a new place and trying to make that decision until you're already inside the building. You're finished entering and you're ready to get to business. So this sign, unfortunately, as lovely as it is kind of useless. Um, Layout, oh, this would be so easy to fix. Just pull the catalog letters down onto the orange so that they look like they belong there. You've kind of made it as hard to read as you possibly can. And then this one, this is the complexity less is more thing. So you've got a bunch of different kinds of signs on this end panel. You've got wayfinding signs for the upper level, main floor, and lower level. You also have informational signs about hours and some promotional signage about programs. And if you're looking at this from some distance away, there's so much there that it's hard for your brain to know which thing it's supposed to look at. So the wayfinding signs, while they may be in a perfect spot, get lost in that clutter and become much less effective. So now on to good signs. I have some kind of fuzzy images in here, and that's actually okay. Kind of a trick for seeing if the layout of a sign is effective at highlighting the most important thing is to squint what the thing is that kind of pops off of that sign. So the fact that the words here in this image are kind of fuzzy is actually okay. It gives you a really good idea of how effective this signage is. The image kind of helps give a cue to what section you're headed toward. It's a nice big arrow and it's at a decision point, as are these signs as well. These are from the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts. I like those a lot. Customer services at Cleveland Heights in Ohio. I love the way that they've used the soffit above the return slot with that big vinyl arrow that's pointing directly at the place where you want to actually return stuff. It's highly legible and legible from a distance away. So if you're looking for returns and you're coming in the front entrance and you're scanning your environment, you're totally going to see that, and it's extremely clear where you need to go to actually return material. This nonfiction signage is from Vernon Area District Library here in Illinois. The most important thing, in my opinion, on a call number sign is the call number. I mean, getting to the section is the responsibility of a different sign. So once you're in that section, you know you're in nonfiction, and the most important piece of information is which shelf am I going to go down to find what I'm looking for. And they've done a really nice job with these. They also have this kind of color coding going on, so an entire section together has the same color bar across the top of each of the signs. I also really love their world languages sign. And the reason I love it so much is because the most important thing is the name of the language in that language rather than in English, presumably because someone who's a native speaker of that language is looking for the stuff rather than an English speaker. So Chinese, the characters are much more easily readable from a distance than the word Chinese, and that's absolutely appropriate in this case. This is at the Naperville Public Library, which is my most recent gig. This is an example of how inconsistency can work in your favor. So they've got a lot of official signage that kind of says, here's this department or this section, and then there's this handwritten sign into the teen area. It looks distinctly different from the other signs that are in that area and makes it really clear that this is a different kind of space. And the informality of it contributes to the fact that it's teens and that we want that space to be for teens only during the time that they're in the building. Another placement sign, this is also at Naperville at the Naper Boulevard Library. Their directory sign used to be way up front here by this plant, which was pretty close to the door, and whether people need to get into the building before they decide what they're going to do. So moving it to this spot actually made a lot of sense. They've since done some renovation, and so we played around with the placement of it. But again, trying to push that information to the point where people actually are ready to see it rather than putting it right at the entrance is always a good call. Okay, so that's wayfinding. Let's move on to informational signage. Informational signage, we want to tell something important or useful to our customer. And consistency is a really important piece of the puzzle. Again, Target does this really well. If you are a sale shopper, you know where to find the sale items because they're on those little tags that stick out and you can eyeball them from the end of the aisle. They don't change them. They're the same thing for every sale. I think they've been that way for years and years. And that consistency works in their favor. It helps highlight the things that are on sale, which is the stuff that they want you to buy. Okay, so placement of informational signage is especially important. Informational signs usually have, not surprisingly, more information on them than directional signage. And so putting those signs in a place where people are actually going to have time to absorb that information and where they're inclined to look at them and read them is an important aspect to consider. This is kind of a little kiosk that's at the in the baby area at the Target in Bolingbrook, actually. And on the table here are some iPads with that link to Baby Center. They have a partnership to like review products and stuff. And there's also this little sign with the 3 dots kind of in front of it. That's the promotional sign for their red card with information about how to get it. It's in a great spot because you're going to actually stop there and look at it for a period of time. Informational signs also don't have to be super complicated. So I love this find the right size car seat sign. There are not instructions, you'll notice, for how to use this sign. We librarians tend to want to explain things in complete sentences because that's kind of what we do. But when it comes to signage, you making assumptions about what people will understand based on the layout of the sign or what it looks like is actually a good way to cut down on the information and make sure the most important stuff is there. So clearly, this is a size chart. People know how to use the size chart, whether they're English speakers or not. And these colored bars here that are on the size chart correspond to the colors that are down the aisle at the top of each section of different kinds of car seats. So you measure your child, figure out what color, find that color down the aisle. Lots of great information, again, using the same color scheme on the sign about that car seat, and it's the right size. It's right in front of the seat. It's where you're actually looking at that particular one. There's a red dot on the left-hand side there that says item 2531. That corresponds to item 2531, which is down below it on the shelf, so you know you're getting the correct piece of equipment. I really like that series of signs a lot. They're very clear and help get people to what they need without going overkill on how to use it. All right, so some bad examples. These 3 signs are all from the same library. The Please Enjoy the Library Together sign actually includes some of their branding information for their library. The other signs don't, which is a lost opportunity at consistency. Even with informational signs, reinforcing your brand kind of helps people sort of understand that it's something important and official that the library really deliberately wants to tell them. Okay, so here's complete instructions and complete sentences. This is obviously taped to the side of a monitor at a catalog computer, and it's a lot of stuff. I don't know that most people are going to walk up to a computer and say, I don't know how to use this, let me read this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to try and understand. They're going to look at the screen, and if it isn't immediately understandable, they might try a couple things and then they're going to come and talk to you. So I would lose this sign altogether and do as best as we can to make our catalog as usable as possible and as intuitive as possible. The sign really doesn't cut it. I love this one. Okay, so this is in the children's department of a library with the rules for this boat that they have that you can get into. It's like a play piece, and they have rules for the boat. Clearly they've had some issues with behavior. What I love though is that there's there seems to be this expectation that kids will be able to read the instruction, put only 5 stuffed animals in the boat, when it's toddlers. It's toddlers who are in the boat, and the parent who's maybe with them maybe sees the sign. It's a like the wrong information or too much information for the audience that it's looking for. You could do something similar with pictures or pictograms that would help communicate the same information. The red circle with a slash through it, people understand what that means, and kids understand what that means as well. The text really is too complex for the audience. This particular sign is attached next to the touch screen on some video dispensing equipment. Again, it's a lot of information and not necessarily relevant to the person who's standing at that screen and has a question. They really just want their DVD, and if it doesn't work, most likely they're not going to look at the sign, they're going to look for somebody to help them. I really like this sign a lot. Unfortunately, it's put in a place where no matter what, there's going to be a person standing in front of it. So the welcome sign has a staff member who's stationed right in front of it, and the only time that you actually are in a position to read the sign is actually when you're at the desk checking out, which is when you're about to leave the library, which is where the welcome maybe isn't quite so useful. So putting that along the path of entry into the library, some distance into the building, might be a better space for it. Signs on doors are problematic. People do not read signs on doors as they're entering the building. They just don't. And especially these rules kinds of signs, they're just, the stop and read plea, it's not going to happen. Signs on doors are effective when they communicate something that you want people to know when they're not going to walk through the doors. And I've got a couple good examples a little bit later on. Okay, so this sign really hurts me. I love the content of it. The literacy tip is awesome, and it's put kind of up on an easel behind the service desk, so it's at a spot where someone's going to stop and actually have time to read it. Unfortunately, it's really very difficult to read and hard to understand what the point of it is with all the squiggles and hearts and everything. I have a couple of signs, this one included, that at the end of the presentation we'll just kind of look at how you could adjust it to make it a little bit more legible and maybe more effective. Another one that kills me, not just because of the clip art, but because the most important information is lost in among all of this text that's the same size. When you have a sign like this about an upcoming closure, the one thing that you want to catch somebody's attention with is the word closed. That's the important information, that the library is going to be closed. And once people have kind of had their eye caught by the word closed, then you can tell them when that's going to happen. That really does get lost in this layout here. Okay, this sign is on the door of a library, and it's intended to be seen from the street. So the word closed is very clearly the biggest thing. It's something that you'd be able to see from a number of feet away as you walk up to the door, and it gives more information about why it's closed and how you can still get library service even though staff aren't available to help you. I'm not a fan of the blue painter's tape, but that aside, the sign itself is pretty great. At Naperville, this is at the Nichols Library in the Children's Department, the most important information here is which number computer are you going to get on to get the game that you want. The fact that it's a game computer is important, but it's much less important than the number of each of those individual computers. And so that high contrast number that you can see from far away from the service desk is really very helpful in this spot. And then these signs are those kind of signs that we have to show people and that really are not anything to write home about. And in this case, they're put in kind of a path of traffic where people tend not to stop and read them. And in that case, that's actually okay. They're signs we have to hang up, but we don't want people's attention caught by them. So putting them in a spot where people aren't going to read them actually is a deliberate choice that can really work for you. Okay, so moving on from informational signs to promotional signs. These are signs that really have to do with a service or a program or a product that we're trying to communicate about. Again, looking at Target, consistency, they're awesome at it. These are signs that are over different folded clothing units that kind of say, here's what clothing you'll find in this spot. The layout of them is exactly the same in every case. The image of the person is on the right-hand half of the screen. It's the people on a white background with a gray shadow behind them. The same gray is in the text that's right next to it. Same font, same size, same placement. Really well done. They also kind of do a twist on that for certain collections of materials. So in this case, it's a different background and a different approach to the photo, but the layout is still the same as the other ones that kind of fit into this collection. The font is the same. It's using the color and branding of their brand Morona, but it still fits with the other promotional signs for those products. Okay, so Target water on sale. This big sign that says $3.50 is awesome, and it's because you can see it from far, far away, and that is the most important piece of information, that this water is on sale for $3.50. There's a quote in Why We Buy from Paco Underhill that says, putting a sign that takes 12 seconds to read in a place where customers spend 4 seconds is just slightly more effective than putting it in your garage. Absolutely true. People are going to see this as they walk past it. A couple of seconds max. That big, huge $3.50 is really easy to take in and understand in that short period of time. Again, the red card promotion, putting this on the aisle and on the counter as you're getting ready to pay, puts it in a place where you actually have time to stop and read it and think about it and think about whether you want to save 5% today. Some more signage hierarchy. If you are a sale shopper, as I am, you are constantly on the lookout in every store you're in for the word sale or clearance. So that big word sale is something that you can see from far away. As you get closer, you get more information about exactly what's on sale and for how much. That information is less important than catching my eye with the word sale. Same thing here. The $5 off is the thing that really pops off of this sign. And so when you see that from far away, that's kind of exciting. I would like to save $5. As you get closer, it gives you the information about the deal, and then even closer information about how to actually get it by texting to Target. So the most important information, or the thing that you want people to notice, is the thing that's visible from the farthest distance away, and more information as the person chooses to get closer and read more about it. Okay, some sad examples. This is obviously inconsistent kind of design. There are 7 fonts on the screen. The layout is kind of all over the place, and it's hard to, they're just hard. They're really hard to read. Okay, so again, this is a lot of information on these little 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. The bigger problem here, though, is that this sign holder is kind of tucked into the corner that's just as you go from the main floor of the library into the storytime room. So it's a path of movement, and people are probably not going to stop on their way to the storytime room to stop and read these signs, even if they were something that was going to catch people's attention and that they would have time to read. The placement is in exactly the wrong place for people to want to see them and read them. Signs on the front doors. People are not going to read them. Signs on doors are very problematic. If you can find a different way to do it, absolutely do. Okay, so legibility. This is for kind of a popular YA book award at this particular library, the Thumbs Up Award. And I kind of like the collage that's on that Vote Today sign. The problem is that Vote Today and what you're voting for gets lost in the collage. It really needs something to help the information about the sign stand off from the design part of the sign. Otherwise, you kind of see it and it's a blur and you don't know what you're looking at. Red and black, worst possible combination of colors for visibility. Contrast is king when it comes to signage. We talked a little bit about Target with their white on red. That isn't the most awesome, but again, the layout kind of helps communicate that. The layout in these is okay. The title of the course at least is the biggest thing, but the rest of the information kind of gets lost and is not very legible. Okay, some good examples. This kind of fuzzy picture is from Arlington Heights, and I love their signage so much. I am a big fan of the signage at Arlington Heights. They're a great place to look if you want ideas for good signage. So Arlington Heights, I bow to you. These are promotional signs for programs that are coming up, and they've approached this in a really interesting way that I love. Consistency, the gray bar across the bottom gives you the audience and tells you the basics of the date and time of that program, but the main part of the sign is given over to the graphics that are selling you on the program or catching your attention so that you'll come over and look a little bit more closely at them. The meat, the description of that program is not on the sign at all, but instead on this little flyer that's right next to it that you can pick up and take away with you. That description is much more appropriate for someone to read after they stick it on the refrigerator with that flyer than to have it all try to be encapsulated in that poster. I really like this approach a lot. Okay, so this is a new DVDs poster. I've seen a lot of libraries that have kind of a bulletin board or some other display of here are the latest releases of our DVD, but they're in a spot where people are not going to stop and look at it, or they're not going to say, I wonder what the new DVDs are, let me go over to this wall and stand in front of it for a while. This is at the Naper Boulevard Library in Naperville, and what they chose to do instead is to put this sign on the table right next to the catalog computer with the idea that you're not going to find this on the shelf, but right here, right now, you can put this DVD on hold and we'll get it to you when it comes in. The placement of it, I think, is perfect. Another sign from Naper Boulevard. Signs don't have to be super fancy and produced to be effective. So this is a crafty person at Naper Boulevard put this sign together, and the legibility and layout here are really what to pay attention to. If you're looking at this sign from far away and you're a Downton Abbey fan, Downton Abbey is going to jump out at you and catch your attention. As you get closer, you get more information about why you should pay attention to the stuff that's here, and they've used a good stock shot from the production company. I mean, it's a really effective and easy to throw together kind of a sign. Okay, so that's a lot all to take in, and it's also a lot to keep in mind when you're just throwing together a quick sign. So if you only remember 3 things from this presentation, it should be these 3 things right here. The first one, the first step to a better sign is to use the right font. One of the things that improves consistency dramatically when it comes to signs is using a consistent font throughout. So for instance, in this presentation, I've been using Seago UI, which is a standard font that comes from Microsoft. It's a solid sans serif font that's very easy to read from a distance. It comes in a bunch of different weights. It's a solid one. If your library has kind of decided on a default font that's on your printed material or that makes up kind of the name of your library as part of your logo or that's all over your website, find out what that font is and use it all the time. That'll automatically help your sign feel consistent with the rest of your signage and the rest of the printed material and branding that you have at your library. It's a quick and easy way to make it really consistent. The second thing is to help the customer out. So customers don't automatically know what the most important piece of information is when they look at your sign. So you got to help them out. Why do you want the customer to read the sign? Is there a single word or a short phrase that you emphasize that cue the customer that this is a sign that they should definitely stop and read and care about? If you can find that one word or phrase and really help the customer out by making it the most prominent thing, that helps in a long way to get customers to actually read the signs that are important to them. And then the third one is hit enter, which sounds kind of silly, but I see this all the time. So word processors are awesome because they have word wrap. It's not like the old days with the typewriter where you had to get to the end of the line and figure out if you had room for the next word or not and do a hard carriage return. Word wrap kind of changed all that. It adjusts the lengths of the lines according to what words are in each one of them, which is great. However, word wrap is not the boss of you. So that means that you can put keywords or phrases on their own line or break lines in a way that lumps information together logically, and that's going to help your customers understand your message more quickly. The enter key is your friend. So let's go back to that literacy tip sign, and I'm going to kind of walk through how you might put some of these concepts to work. First, I made a black and white copy of the image just to make it a little bit easier to manipulate. I'm not in any way arguing against color. This really just was convenience on my part. So the first thing that I did was to get rid of where it says Central Youth Wing at the top part of the sign, as well as some of the doodling that's around it. The youth wing, presumably if you're already standing in the desk at the children's area, you don't need a sign to tell you that that's where you are. And I also got rid of the doodling so that it's really the content that's the thing that we're focusing on this particular sign. So there are three main pieces of information that are here on this sign. The title, BPL's Literacy Tip of the Month, the tip itself, read it again, Mom, and it's okay if your child wants to read the same books over and over, and then the skills that that particular tip is going to help build. So I separated those sections and moved them around a little bit to set them off and make them more distinct from one another. Then I thought about what's the most important thing in the sign. What do I want to catch people's attention with? And it's really the tip itself. Read it again, Mom. So I bumped up the size of that quote. So that's the thing that catches people's eyes first. And it's a phrase that if you're a mom of young children, you've heard your child say this to you, and so that's more likely to catch your attention now that it's larger and it's set off from some of the other information that's there. Not a lot of major changes here, but it really makes a big difference in the readability of the sign. So that's one example. Okay, let's take a look at that holiday closing sign again. Now, I'm guessing this is a pretty small library and that the holidays and the year that they made the sign kind of fell on weekends in some weird way because they're closed a lot, but that's really not the point here. The point is we're going to try to make the sign stronger. So the first thing I did was get rid of the clip art. You could certainly add some images back in at the end, but if it's the information that's the most important thing, not the image, then you deal with the information first, and images support that rather than are the first thing that go on the page. So now let's play with some line breaks. The most important thing here, the one word that you want people to see as they walk by is the word closed. So let's set that off on a line by itself. I also played around a little bit with the way the dates are arranged. In the original sign, it's hard to, you have to really work to decode exactly when those closures are taking place. Having the individual numbers set off and having them grouped in the way that they are is not immediately intuitive. So instead I changed it to really focus on the two holidays that they're closed, Christmas and New Year's. So the first line is the days that they're closed around Christmas, and those last two lines are the days that they're closed around New Year's. It's a lot easier at a glance to understand that those are the two time frames that we're talking about. And then I played around with the size of the text. I made the most important thing, the word closed, much bigger, and I reduced the size of the things that were much less important. So the library will be is not a terribly important part of the sign, although it's a nice way to kind of put it. I don't mind it being there, but it should be a smaller size than the more important stuff, closed and the dates, and then the word and got reduced as well. So here's the original sign again, and then here's our rearrangement of it. Hopefully those two examples will give you an idea of how to take these principles and apply them to the signage that's in your own library. And hopefully you'll be able to go back and look at your library space with a new eye. If you keep these steps in mind, the quality and usability will go up dramatically. You'll be in much better shape. Your customers will thank you for it. So let's see. Louise, I see that you've pushed through a question that says, we don't have a marketing person. How do I get staff on board? They think they're artistic, but they don't have a clue on these great concepts. Well, this webinar is being recorded, so you could certainly pass it along that way. Another thing to do is that can be really overwhelming, and so you want to be kind of sensitive about it, is to do kind of a signage field trip and go to a neighboring library or even a retail store and take a camera with you and take pictures of as many signs as you possibly can and bring them back and kind of look at why they're effective or why they're not effective. It's kind of it's a tricky thing. I would also say that, I don't know, it's once you start to see it, you see it everywhere. I mean, so understanding what the concepts are will kind of, I've seen it unlock for people a different way of looking at their own signage. Question, is it a waste of time to place library closure signs on your front door in advance of the closure? That's a really good question. I think you definitely want library closure signs on your doors by the time you're actually closed, so that when people come up to the door, if they haven't heard about it already, they'll see that you're closed. The more effective place for telling people about upcoming closures are in places where they're likely to stop and stand still for a moment. So in an elevator, the back of restroom stall doors, that's an awesome place for getting across information. Putting a sign right at the service desk where someone's going to stop for a moment and do something, or on top of the receipt printer at your self-check station, putting that information on your receipt. Those are all ways that you can communicate that information before the closure in a way that's going to be more effective than putting the sign on the door. Because again, that sign on the door, people are not going to read it until they're at the door and it's closed and they can't figure out why they can't get in. So that's a really good question. Thanks for the tip about taking signs out of walkways and into places where people are naturally going to pause and orient themselves. Absolutely. One of the that kind of gets to the question of decision points. If you were at ALA Midwinter in the new McCormick West building, or if you have the opportunity to go there again, wayfinding signs, they have done an awesome job with those, like to the point that I didn't take pictures, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't. Like, I was going to go to a session, and it's in room W1 something something, and I'm on the third floor, and I'm walking, and I'm like, okay, so where do I go? And at the moment that I was kind of having that thought in my head, I could see the sign that told me exactly where it was that I needed to go. It was a great example of looking at those decision points and making sure that people have the information that they need exactly where they need it. Let's see, what else? I'm not sure how to best combat putting all the information on a flyer by staff. Yeah, the reason I showed that example from Arlington Heights is because I think that's one way to approach it, that the sign is about catching your eye and making you interested, but the flyer has the information and that's going to come with the person and to a place where they're actually going to read it. I like that approach a lot. I know what you're saying though, because we write these really cute descriptions for our programs and want people to know what to expect when they come. And in a program guide, that might make a lot of sense, but on a sign, it's really more about catching people's attention and communicating something quickly. So maybe looking at that two-pronged approach might be a way to approach it. Similarly, it seems the nature of librarians that they want to put everything. Yeah, we want to put signage up about everything. But I fear a lot of our signage has so much information that people just tune out or think something is too complicated, and that's absolutely true. The picture that I had of the wayfinding signage that was also on the same thing as some informational signage and some program promotional signage is a really good example of that. If you've got too much stuff, then you're not helping the customer out by telling them what the most important thing is that they need to look at. So I would encourage you to work with your coworkers and come to some agreement about what is the most important thing. Is the most important thing the regular weekly story time that people are probably not going to learn about first from a sign in your library, or is it about a big event that your friends are throwing as the fundraiser that's a one-time deal that you want people to get their attention caught? And to talk about things like that together so that you come to some agreement about what is most important. There's so much info to communicate sometimes, but you don't want to overwhelm, this is another question, you don't want to overwhelm patrons, so where do you draw the line? There's some give and take that has to come along with this. I think having information available to hand to somebody can be much more effective than having a sign. So having, for instance, your code of conduct posted on a sign might be great if it's really concise and really pared down, but probably the better approach is going to be to have a brochure to hand to somebody if they say, where does it say I can't do whatever? So that they have that information in their hand, and instead on the sign do something like, welcome to the library for your enjoyment, please keep your voice down, or something like that that is still informational, but it doesn't include maybe the whole policy, just the stuff that's really important for people to know about at a glance. Websites are a great place to put that stuff. And when I say have something to hand to a person, I'm not saying that you have to have a whole array of flyers and acrylic holders that are sitting on your desk so that people can take them themselves. You might have a file drawer that has that stuff in it that you can pull open and hand to somebody. You might have it on your website that you can point people to, that you can print on demand for a customer. That bulky information typically doesn't apply to everybody, or you don't want to catch everybody's attention with it the way you do some other communication that you would put on a sign. So having it available to hand to people when it's relevant, I think, is a really good way to approach that. I have a thank you that it'll be a great reference. Question, my library has too many graphic artists. How do I tactfully get them to tone it down? Often the signs don't go up until the day of the event, which is kind of a waste. Yes, absolutely it is. A sign on the day of the event goes from being a promotional sign to being a wayfinding sign. There's this thing happening and here's where it's happening, and if you go there right now, you can participate in this thing. Signs that are going to get people to come to the program really do need to go out much sooner than that. And depending on how long your checkout kind of length is, that's a good rule of thumb for when to put a sign up. So if your materials check out for 3 weeks, trying to get that sign up 3 weeks before the program means that someone who has a routine of coming every 3 weeks sees that sign when they're ready and says, oh, the next time I'm at the library to return my books, I can come to that thing. As to the graphic artist question, that's a sensitive question because you don't want to completely cut people off from that creative expression, especially if it's something that they really enjoy doing. So my approach to that would be to do a couple of things. One is to decide together on a primary font to help give things some consistency, or to decide, you know, the graphics and stuff, the design of this poster can be different depending on who's doing it, but our logo always appears in the bottom left corner and it's always this size. That consistency can help a lot. I think also looking at things that are more display oriented than communication oriented are also a really good place to kind of direct that creative energy. Instead of having people, well, kind of like the book display that I showed you for the Downton Abbey stuff. I mean, that's something that is promotional. You want to promote those materials, and that can be different from the informational signs or signs about programs or services. It's really a more on-the-fly, ad hoc kind of thing. I've had some success with templates. So you have this space in the middle to do whatever you want with, and the other stuff you really don't touch. But it also takes some diplomacy. It's a tricky thing, and as I said, if you have creative people, you don't want to just squelch that creativity. Question, it's an excellent point about too much information hiding the most important information. Yes, absolutely. Another question, I'm a new youth services librarian in a community with a high Hispanic population. Our Spanish nonfiction collection is shelved in a different area than the English nonfiction, and currently our signage for the English nonfiction is out of date. Would you recommend creating signage in both English and Spanish for both nonfiction collections? Sure. Yeah, I think so. And I think you can take your cues from retail in that way. A couple of the signs that I showed from Target had both English and Spanish on them, and I think depending on the demographics of the market that that store is located in dictates whether Spanish is on it at all and how big it is in relation to English. So you might take a look at what grocery stores and banks, for instance, are doing with their signage when it comes to handling Spanish language. I think looking at the demographics is important. If you have a lot of English users who are savvy about libraries, they may not need the signage as much as someone who's maybe new to an American public library and would benefit more from more signage. So I think that would be a good approach to take. Another question, what about Facebook postings? Limited info or give it all to them? I would do limited info on the Facebook posting with a link to more information. The Facebook posting, certainly the way I use Facebook, and I think the way a lot of people use Facebook, is we kind of scroll through and pretty quickly, and the stuff that catches our eye, that's like, oh, that's interesting, we're much more likely to click through it and read it, and I think we should use that same approach. You want to use either text or images that tell people that most important thing in a way that makes them stop and say, oh, this is really an interesting program or service, and then allow them to click through to the more complete information about whatever that is. Let's see. I would say too, let's see, I totally just lost that train of thought. It'll come back to me. Yeah, it'll come back to me. So I think that's all the questions that have come into the question box so far. If anyone has others, Louise, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, it's Louise, I'm here. That was the last question. So
Great.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I thought this was really interesting and helpful. I learned a lot.
And hopefully you'll look at
Yeah,
signs in a
yeah,
totally new way
yeah.
as you're walking around your library and out in the world at large. My contact information is here on the screen. As it says, I'm actually very soon, in the next 3 weeks, moving to New Jersey to start a new job at the Somerset County Library System there. But I will continue to be available by email if you have any questions or need more information.
That's great. Thanks, Lynn. Just a note to the audience, Lynn offered to have us record the session, so we've been recording, and we've got to do some technical things in the back to get that ready, and we'll post it on the Rails CE archives page on our website, and we'll send an email alert out to everyone when that's ready. So, Lynn, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and
My pleasure.
stop the webinar, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Have a great day.